Hey, welcome to the channel, guys. This is a video on my 18 STI and how to remove the intake manifold. As you can see, it is currently out. This video is going to include a step-by-step checklist that you can refer to as far as everything that needs to be disconnected before removing the intake manifold, as well as going over the final steps, predominantly the wiring harness and all of the connectors that need to be taken off before the intake manifold can be removed. Everything prior to that, such as the SF intake, the alternator, the top mount, there's videos for if you just refer back and follow them along in order. I've essentially detailed everything step by step from the very beginning all the way through to removal of this intake manifold. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay guys, I just wanted to share one more thing. I found it pretty confusing and difficult getting this intake manifold off, especially the first time that I did it. This is actually the second time that I've gone through it, so I'm trying to be a little bit more organized here. But I created a list. I'm not sure if you guys can read my terrible handwriting or not, but essentially this is a list of everything that needs to come off before removing this intake manifold. So I'm pretty sure this is complete. But I feel like this would have been pretty useful the first time that I did this, and I'm hoping to kind of get this down to where I can get these removed without difficulty and without having to stop and think about it. So really we took off the intake, we took the top mount intercooler off, we completely removed the alternator, we set the power steering and AC aside. We had those 3 PVC connectors that we disconnected. It's kind of a tube that includes the connector, the electrical connector, and then we taped all those off because we're not going to use those. That allowed us to pull off this PCV crossover pipe, and then we removed the secondary air pump, got that out of the way. We took off that evap system as well as that boost controller. We disconnected those fuel lines, and then we have the 2 throttle body coolant lines. And then we have that lower or underneath throttle body PCV line, which I had forgotten to remove. The turbo inlet I forgot to remove, which is only slightly embarrassing. And then we have these 2 vacuum lines on the rear side of the driver's intake manifold that we had to disconnect. These ones right here and here. And then as far as the connectors go, just to try and simplify this, so we've got the crank positioning sensor, the coolant temperature sensor, the oil pressure sensor, and the power steering sensor. Those are all right here in the front. So those are kind of the first 4 that you're going to disconnect. And then the 6 PCV sensors we should have already disconnected. That main wiring plug, which is this giant guy right here. And then from there, on each side, we've got 2 cam positioning sensors, 2 AVCS sensors, and 2 coil packs. So 2 of those on each side, basically upper and lower for the cam and the AVCS. And then on the driver's side, we also have these 2 secondary air pump connectors, and that should be everything to get this intake manifold off. So I'm just going to keep this list for next time. So hopefully that helps you guys out a little bit. The next steps where we're at, as I mentioned before, is removing some of these connectors with a goal of basically removing any connection from the intake manifold to the block. So we had to remove this here. This is the crank positioning sensor. You can see I've taped all these up. Hopefully it's not too disruptive for you. This is going to be the oil pressure sensor. Back here, connected to this big long reservoir looking thing, this is the engine coolant temperature sensor. And then we do have this, so that's 3 out of these 4 wires. This 4th wire right here, this one just connects to the power steering pump here, not to the black end but to the white end right there. Then we come around here to the driver's side. And we have this. This is the AVCS sensor. So you can see it's blue. I think these might be the only ones that are blue, which makes it pretty nice. So you can see where that connects to down there, hopefully. It's essentially this big solenoid right here. You've got two on each side, one on the top, one on the bottom. And then I'll show you underneath. So see, it's the exact same thing underneath. It's this big solenoid right here. This is the black connector right here. This is the blue wire that plugs into it like so. Directly above this, you have this little black sensor right here, which hopefully you guys can see. There we go, it's that guy right there. And that's going to be this gray plug right here. So basically you have two down here. They're both attached to each other. It's pretty easy to figure out. Keep in mind there is a little tether here. This wiring thing is tethered to this little bracket by this little black thing. Basically you just have to press both those in and this just pops right out. Now this wire is loose and ready to come up with us when we remove the intake manifold. The last thing we have to remember is that there is this guy right here. This is essentially a tether, or it's a ground actually, and this goes from here, from the AVCS, whoops, this guy's getting away from me, solenoid right here, up to there. It's just a 10 mil and that just pops right off. And actually, now that I think about it, you don't even really need to remove that, so I'm not sure why I did. You could probably actually leave that in place unless you're removing the engine. Okay, and then the other thing that we do have is coil packs. This may be a better place to show them right here. I'm not sure. Up here on the side of the engine, you can kind of see it. There's two black squares up there. And then two wires, both with a blue label on them. Those are the coil packs. So those go directly to the spark plugs. There's one coil pack for each spark plug, two on each side. Those are really easy to get out, actually. I'll show you up above. Let's see here. So this is the wire right here. So this plugs right into the side of the coil pack, and what I did was just take a screwdriver and on the side of this where my thumb is, just lift up with a thin screwdriver as I push out, and just in one motion with that screwdriver, this guy just popped right off. It was really easy, surprisingly easy. So you've got the two over here you can see. So I went ahead and actually left that one in place just so I could show you. So you just take your screwdriver right there, pull up on that guy, and then he just pops right out like that. It's pretty easy. Once again, you've got an AVCS sensor right here. It's the exact same thing. This blue guy plugs into this solenoid right here. Those ones are pretty obvious because they all look the same and have those blue connectors. And then on the driver's side, or I'm sorry, on the passenger side, you do have this guy. There's like this cover that's in the way that sits right here. So you just have to remove that 10 mil bolt, which is right there. And then this thing literally just pops off. And then you've got these last two little connectors exposed. So you've got the, once again, the active valve control system and then the cam positioning sensor. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect those. I'll get those labeled up. And then the next step should be for us to actually start to unbolt the intake manifold. Okay guys, we actually have 3 more connectors up here that I want to mention that are going to need to be removed, it looks like. So this guy right here, I mentioned this before, but this is part of the air pump, the secondary air pump system. This is the one with the barometric sensor. This is going to need to be connected, it looks like, because this connects to the main wiring harness. Then we've got below it, we've got another one down here, which my flashlight is on pretty much directly. That one's going to need to come off. And then also back here, so this one right here we don't need to remove necessarily, because this is going to come off with the intake, because this is the TGV sensor. But down back here in the corner, I don't think I'm going to be able to film this, guys, but there is another cam positioning sensor way in the back. It's kind of at the back of the fuel rail. It's extremely hard to see. And I believe that there's probably going to be one on each side. Yep, I can see this one as well. So those are going to need to come off. So basically both of those cam positioning sensors. And then, like I said, these two secondary air pump sensors are going to need to be disconnected. And then the last one, which I also didn't mention, is going to be this large wiring harness, basically that just connects it to the car. So the easiest way to remember this for me, it looks like, is there's 4 AVCS sensors and there's 4 cam positioning sensors. So kind of 2 on each side. Those are a big part of it. There's 2 of the coil packs on each side. And then you've got the 2 air pump connectors, and then you got all these ones in the front that we already talked about. So let me get these difficult cam positioning sensors unplugged, as well as the rest of these I just talked about, and then we'll move forward with unbolting the intake manifold. Okay guys, so as you can see, I ended up getting the intake manifold off. I actually filmed the entire thing and then erased it accidentally, which really irritated me. As I said, this is kind of my first time going through this process, so I apologize for that. But I just wanted to kind of talk to you about the final steps as far as getting this off. As I mentioned, we just needed to get those remaining sensors disconnected. And then it's a little bit easier to show you here now that it's out as well. But essentially you have 4 bolts on each side holding these TGV. So these are the TGV housings. So you've got a bolt here, and then you've got 2 bolts here in the center, and then you've got another one over here that you can see. And basically this is what they look like once they come out. They're kind of these long bolts that sit right there. So you take all 4 of those guys out, and it does take a little bit of pressure to pop these gaskets loose. They're pretty adhered. So once you break this loose, you kind of just gently work this up on each side. The secret with this is that you want to go really gently and essentially try and feel for any snags, anything that you did not have disconnected. A couple of snags that I ran into is that on the bottom side of this, if I can get to it to show you, there is a, let's see if I can turn this to show you a little better. See that tube right there? So that tube essentially is part of the PCV system, and that I did not disconnect. So that runs over here and connects to this tube right here. So that was a snag that I hadn't disconnected. And then other snags, essentially this wiring harness was attached over here to the side of the engine. Hopefully you can see this just with these little zip ties. So there were 2, there was a zip tie area here and a zip tie area here that I hadn't disconnected. So those were pulling on, essentially those were a connection that I didn't remove between the intake manifold and the engine. And then there was one more here. So I had all the connectors disconnected, but there was a zip tie around this to the wiring harness over here. And this was kind of another tether. So like I said, just pull up gently on this as you remove it. Feel for any resistance and then just double check, because the last thing you want to do is destroy one of these connectors when you're removing this guy.